Melanie, I'd like to just ask you again, if the media, if TV is the ultimate media that really influences people, how do, whatever the issue is, if there is something important that's been discussed, how do you get it so that the TV stations will talk about it or will publicize it? Is that possible, or are we saying that they're influenced too much by industry? Or is there a way, if there are real issues that we're talking about that are meaningful, how would you get those onto national TV?
Well, I mean, I think there are certain stories that are compelling to TV more so than others. Like the pink slime example is something that they knew people would react to. It was a huge ick factor. It was just gross, you know, ammonia-treated beef that nobody knew was in our hamburgers. And it's like people they knew there would be people who'd have a visceral reaction and a very personal reaction, especially if they worried that their kids were eating it in school lunch, which some of them were. I think that trying to talk about animal welfare and the concern of animals and the well-being of animals is much harder. It's a much harder sell because you have to get people to care about that. And you have to get people to go beyond themselves and just beyond their health and to understand the ways in which the well-being of animals is somehow connected to all of us and connected to them indirectly, but very much connected. So I think it's a harder sell, and you have to find a way that the story is going to resonate with people. Like, why are people going to care about this story? How do we make them care about it? And I think it's something that people in this movement maybe haven't talked about enough to try and figure out how to make people connect with that if they're already not in touch with that. I mean, I think if you took kids on field trips to pork production facilities, for instance, that would be a great way. You know, you could take adults too to get them to care about it personally. But you know, no pork producer, factory farm confined pork producer is going to let you do that. So short of that, you know, you can get them to watch videos, but and some of those videos, like the Mercy for Animal videos in the Humane Society, those do make it into the media, but you know, they don't become the sensation that something like pink slime did.
Okay, if you would like to ask a question of Melanie, Will, and David, you can raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone.
Maybe for the next question, I'll just say, I also think that besides showing people the cruelty of animal production and so forth, another thing that we could do would be enormously transformational, I think, in a positive way, would be to teach kids how to garden. You know, and how to grow their own food, how to prepare their food, and how to really, I think, I've seen this in some schools that have had garden projects, and because when kids see vegetables in the store, they think that doesn't look very good when they eat them. But I think when kids grow their own vegetables and are part of the process, and I think all of us actually, I mean, I personally, you know, we lived in an RV for 17 years up until recently, and now we have created, over the last 2 years, a food forest and planted lots of fruit trees and berries and herbs and vegetables and all these things. And there's just this fabulous sense of creating a whole environment where birds and butterflies and beneficial insects and you know, it's just this kind of like a little paradise. And out of that comes all this food, and it's just pouring out, you know. And that we can live on this. We can really live. It was so interesting. I know not everyone lives in Maui, but I was in Maui not too long ago giving a day-long workshop at a retreat center, and the fellow who owns the land there talked about how he gave this short talk, and he said, "What you're looking at when you look at me, my body is fueled about 33% by my breadfruit tree." He said, when I first moved onto this land, I planted a breadfruit tree, a tiny little sprout, and I watered it and I nurtured it, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and now it's this huge tree. And most breadfruit trees only give out their fruit once a year. This gives out fruit twice a year. Basically, the entire year, it's always fruiting, and I've learned how to, breadfruit is something you have to cook, so, I know how to fry it, how to bake it, how to boil it, how to steam it, I love breadfruit. I love my breadfruit tree. I eat every single day from my breadfruit tree, and my breadfruit tree every single day is feeding me, and I'm feeding it, and I'm giving her all my energy, and I'm helping her, and he said, this is how I live, is from this breadfruit tree. And I realized, just listening to him, how some people, when they say, yeah, well, eating meat, it's part of the natural cycle. It's sort of life feeding on life. And I thought, no, this is life feeding on life. This is how, this is really life. That's life feeding on death. This is life feeding on life, really loving the land, loving the plants, giving them our love, and how he said this tree just loves him. He can feel it, and he communicates, and he has a sense of being nurtured, not just physically, but on many other levels as well. And I think this kind of a thing, helping us to reconnect with the earth and with the miracle of growing our own food, and the beauty of the possibility we have as human beings to create a society with a different foundation that's based on honoring Sophia, the sacred feminine, which yearns to nurture life, is something we can all do on some level. We can all contribute to that in some way. And I think this is, instead of fighting against corporations, just create an alternative. Do our own thing, make local CSAs and so forth, and just create alternative currencies, create alternative everything. That's what we need to do, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question, and I have a thought. Steve was talking about media, and this is a question for the audience or anybody out there who has some ideas. I had a business inside Whole Foods Market in 1988, I guess, when I met Ann Wigmore, who mentored me. And I used to do classes inside the store and prepare sprouting and energy soup and all kinds of different things. And I guess that was kind of interesting because I was sitting there almost on the floor playing with people's feet, doing reflexology. And the media picked us up because, a lot of people come into Whole Foods. That's when they used to do juices and everything was organic and, those times. So the media picked us up. And all of a sudden, there were other medias that were picking us up. We even had people from Brazil come over and flew us to New York and all this other stuff. The point was that I got on television many times, like maybe 7 or 8 times, USA Today, all this other stuff, I think because I was doing something unique. I was playing with people's feet. And people didn't know what reflexology was. But then I was introducing living foods. And now I'm going, because I'm in a different phase of that same conversation, I'm going back to the media that promoted me, or the channels that promoted me, saying, she's back. And this is what I'm doing. So my question is, of anybody, given that my commitment is children, what are you guys doing that is specific to educating children? And you touched on it, because I'm creating a children's garden where it's going to be an after school so the community can come and learn how to farm, how to create permaculture, how to sprout, how to germinate, how to ferment. And I find that when you work with the children, then the children teach the parents. So whenever I do a class, you have to bring a child. We have to borrow one if you don't have one, so that children support me. They're my assistants. And they teach the parents, right? They go home and they teach the parents. So because children are my future, and I have a 50-year mission that 50 years from now, our children today, or the ones coming in, will be born into a paradise, because I said so. And I'm enrolling people to really take that on. Helen said, I'm voting for her. She's going to be the next president. There's all kinds of stuff going on out there. But the most important thing is to take care of ourselves and to take care and nurture those children. So the question is, who knows how to take the most important piece of our children, which is education and school and what they're eating, to bring that message to the media, so that the media can pick it up and say, wow, there's something happening here. Maybe because they're curious. I don't know, they were curious about something in the past. But what could they be curious about today that has to do with those children? Can any of you address that?
I mean, I would just say, you know, we don't have to necessarily anymore, which is one of the beauties of the internet, you know, rely on the major media either. You know, you can get something to go viral on YouTube just because people love it. And I think that you can reach millions of people with beautiful ideas if you can you know, just get them out there. And so I think it's more and more, hopefully, if we can keep the internet democratized, we can empower each other by creating videos of I think video, you know, creating videos of this, and that helps to plant the seed, because when people see something like that, it can build an energy of excitement, you know. But that's just one idea. Maybe other people have ideas.
The dairy industry spends $50 million every year promoting dairy to children in schools. They're in 70,000 schools. I mean, you almost can't walk through a public school in this country without seeing messages promoting milk, posters, and other you know, pamphlets and literature. If dairy weren't considered such a sort of a normal thing to consume in this country, that would be shocking to people. If some of the clinical research that shows that dairy is actually harmful to children were made more widely available, that would be shocking to people. You know, there are studies that show that children who consume a lot of dairy reach puberty sooner, they reach menarche sooner, they may have higher elevated risk for breast cancer and other forms of cancer. This is really shocking stuff. Nobody seems to care about it much because the conventional wisdom is that, well, dairy is just something that we've always consumed and we always will consume, and you need dairy for healthy bodies. But you know, if people could be made to understand that dairy isn't really the thing for their kids, then they would be shocked by the fact that all of this money is being spent to promote it to their children. And that might be a media issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to get those messages out of the schools. I mean, there's no place. I mean, the schools in our town. I live in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado. It's a fairly progressive community, and I've never seen any dairy ads or any commercial stuff in the schools. But I think that's atypical. There are still schools that have box top, or you're supposed to take the tops of processed food, and then you get money for your school. There's pizza companies that come into schools, and it's just not the right place for marketing, particularly for unhealthy foods. I think that there is interesting things going on elsewhere in the UK recently. Jamie Oliver, if you guys watched, he had a show on here. He's a famous British chef. He was on for a few seasons here in the US, and he's been at the forefront of this in the UK, and he and his organization and others have actually gotten cooking classes implemented in all the schools in the UK, so that kids are learning just basic, fun, simple cooking skills, how to work with fresh food. They teach where food comes from. And I think it's so important to start with kids, because if you can get kids thinking differently about food, or if you can get them just thinking that real food is real food, and they don't think that eating frozen pizza and soda and Taco Bell for dinner is a normal thing. If they understand really what food is and the role that it's supposed to play in our lives, then you can change. I mean, that's the way to change the world, if you change the way kids think. And kids at an early age, I know from having my own kids up until, from what people tell me, it's age 12, they start thinking you're an idiot. Up until that point, they believe everything you say. So you kind of have this window to influence them and to open their mind up and change the programming that they might be getting from society at large, and from marketing messages too.
Hi, I want to make a comment about your information, Will. Very profound. The Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, a very esteemed university in Europe, mathematically calculated after reviewing 37 million companies and 47,000 transnational corporations that indeed less than 1% of the world controls the world, and lo and behold, they're the banks. Now, I know you said 4 corporations control the media. I think it's 6, but indeed they are owned by the banks, with the kingpin bank being the Vatican Bank. Now, the fact that you enlightened us yesterday and today that Pecos, which means cow, created pecuniary, chattel, the etymology of which is cattle. I think you also mentioned that Gavia, a Sanskrit word, is connected to war and to have many cows. And then you basically offline talked about the denarius, de meaning 10, and denarius being a Roman coin to have 10 cows. And then through your comparative religion studies, you also enlightened us on the fact that the kings were really the ranchers that controlled the cows, and now the military and the religion and the government. I think from a very deep spiritual perspective, we absolutely should stop eating meat. The sacred feminine that you talk about and the way things are abused and the complete parallel of what we see in society. I'm just really grateful to you for bringing this extreme awareness, but I wanted to make the parallel with the banks, the money changers, the kings, the ranchers of the cattle from that 10,000 years ago, and how that oppression can be lifted by us just saying no to the cows and the meat and becoming vegan. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's, it's important to remember when someone says they're a farmer, to say, well, what kind of farmer? Because farmer can be either animal or plant, right? And from the very beginning, animal agriculture was men's work, and it brought out the worst in people. Always brought out the very worst in people, and it was about, and the animals were always resisting, right? They were always. And from the very beginning, when you look at plant agriculture, from the very beginning, it was women's work, basically, and it's working with the miraculous beauty of, the basic fact that you plant one seed and you get 10,000 seeds, right? That you're working with the natural cycles of the seasons and the sun and the moon and so forth, and you're working essentially with something that's cooperative. You plant things and they grow, and you plant a tree and you get thousands of trees, and the trees don't charge you per apple. The trees don't say, well, I'm giving you more figs this year, but you got to pay me or something. No, they're just giving. There's this enormous generosity that's foundational to plant agriculture. There's no more beautiful place we can go than a garden that's bringing forth fruits and vegetables and berries and herbs and things. And you think of the most absolute horrific hell realm on planet Earth, it's animal agriculture. There's nothing uglier. It smells bad, it looks bad, it's toxic, it's violent, it's unbelievably horrific. And to think we would actually take products from that and feed that to our children, that we would feed this terror and fear and pain and despair that's based on not just humans dominating animals, but on men dominating female animals. We have to really understand that animal agriculture is based on profoundly domination of the feminine. You could not have animal agriculture without the complete domination of female animals and stealing their babies and raping them against their will and over and over and over again. That's utter sexual violence. All animal agriculture, backyard animal agriculture to factory farm, it's all the same. It's all based on the domination of female animals brutally, and feeding that to our children. And how do we expect to have a society of justice between the genders, or any kind of justice and equality in our relationships with each other, or respect for each other, when we're living in a way of massive disrespect? And so I think underlying all this is realization that if I take out my wallet and pay for the flesh or secretions of tortured, enslaved female animals, I'm actually putting money into a system that is making all of us very unfree. It's actually, the ancient teaching is whatever you sow, you will reap. If we want to enslave animals, all right, but when you do that, you become yourself, you lose your own freedom. And we have allowed a system to evolve through corporations. That's really how it is, you know, and large financial institutions that in many ways have us under their thumb in the sense that we're working and most of the money is going not for our benefit. We're not getting it back. It's going other places. And we can see this, I think, if we're paying attention. I mean, we're relatively privileged. If we're sitting here, we're relatively privileged. But essentially, this is the situation here. So we must question animal agriculture. That is where it gets its claws into us, is through getting us to eat this stuff, to pay for this, actually, and feed it to our children. And we can realize that again, we don't have to fight against the system. We can actually realize that this system has evolved for whatever reason, and we can withhold our support from it, and then give our support to alternatives, to the beautiful alternatives that are ever present. I mean, there's infinite possibilities of incredibly beautiful projects that we can embark on together, of films and music and art and gardening and speaking and teaching. You know, this is Steve created this. I mean, you know, 10 days of people talking about these things, and who knows what seeds this will plant, right? And we can, each one of us, go forth from here and plant our own seeds, and that'll inspire other people to plant more seeds. And that's really, I think, we're on this planet for a few years. Let's do something to help this poor, in a sense, beautiful planet in the middle of outer space. We've come here, and we've been able to awaken enough from the cultural trance to see that we can contribute something of benefit. And I think that's the most inspiring and beautiful thing we can do. So thank you for pointing that out. Thanks.
I want to thank you, like everyone else here, just for this profound conference. We're all benefiting. I can't help but think that our animal companions that live with us, that sleep with us, that there's something there. There is a connection there. It's almost like homeopathy. It's like the solution could be in the, shall we say, disease. And how many households have animal companions? More so than even children. Many people that don't have children have animal companions. And so there's a connection there. I haven't made it yet. I'm going to contemplate it. But I really feel that somehow these creatures have come to us to help us heal the planet. And being creatures themselves, they have some secrets that our love for them will release to us. I see it with my own companions, and I hear them. You know, there's so for all of us that have animal companions, this is a really important relationship for our planet. And I had mentioned this yesterday, Will, if you could speak on even their diet. You know, their diets are, some of them are carnivores. At least we've been told they're carnivores. So we have to feed them meat. So could you talk a little bit about that and about the other things that I've brought up?
Just briefly, you know, I think, you know, part of the reason we see ourselves as carnivores is because we live in a society where not only are we eating it, we're forced from the time we're little children to eat meat, dairy products, and eggs, but we have the two main companion animals we have are carnivorous, right? And we very much identify with our dogs and cats. Well, my dog's like me, and my cat's like me, and so I must be a carnivore too, because the dog and the cat, they're carnivores, so I must be one too. If we weren't raised in a society, and dogs and cats were basically brought into a herding society in order to help the herders, right? In order to help protect against foxes and other things, in order to kill predators like cats are. So that's part of the whole programming, really, of living in this society. And in the 2 points, I think this is good news in the sense that dogs are easy vegans. I mean, it's not difficult. They're very much naturally omnivorous, and you can make your own food. There's many recipes online with lentils and carrots and other things. You can buy Evolution or V-Dog, or there's a bunch of different types. And cats are a little more difficult, but Evolution makes a vegan cat food, and the founder of that, who has been doing this for like 25 years, told me on the phone a while back that from his research, about 2/3 of all cats will thrive on a vegan diet. So, so we do have options if we don't want to feed dead animals to our companion animals. But I also want to say that I think that these dogs and cats, perhaps, as they enter our lives, we're teaching them, but I think they're teaching us a lot, and opening our hearts to respect for all life. But I also want to say that I think we should really open up also, if we can, to free-living animals, to so-called wild animals. And I don't know how that will happen, for you individually as people, but I have found myself, perhaps it's because I'm a vegan, that when I go out into nature, the animals are not afraid of me. And there's this. I had one experience that was pretty pivotal, I think, for me, when I was living at one point in my life. I lived in a 1971 Volkswagen bus, and I was traveling around the country, and I was up in the Olympic Mountains outside of Seattle, and I left my van, and I went one way up, and I left my van, and I went hiking, and I hiked way the heck up high, and then I went way far down to the stream, to this lake, and took a swim, and then I was trying to make my way back before it got dark, and I had gone way too far. I had no food, I had no water, I got really exhausted. I was hiking in the moonlight, up this hill that went on forever, and I was getting really, I didn't think I was going to make it. And I was exhausted, and it was really far. I'd gone, so many miles. And so I was just hoping I could somehow get back to my van, my Volkswagen bus. And I was going along, I was tromping my way up this endless hill, and I was at the absolute limit. I could barely make one more step and barely make another step, and I thought, I'm just going to have to bivouac here, But I wanted to try to get back. And at that moment, suddenly an elk appeared and started walking next to me and just walked beside me. And we walked together. And the elk was like just a couple of yards away. And in the state I was in, because when you're all alone way out in the middle of nowhere, in the moonlight, it's not the same. I was in kind of an altered state, and so I wasn't even surprised. It was like, oh, hello, I'm glad you're here. And he walked along beside me, or she. I felt like it was a he. He walked along beside me, and I just felt my energy coming. I just felt this energy coming, like I could make it, And we walked along together for a while, and then at one point he sort of picked up his pace and kind of ran. Went off in front of me and disappeared into the shadows, and he was gone. But that got me. It was like, all right, And so I kept going, and I made it to the top of the hill, and I looked down. There was my little van. I get down there, and I remember going back down, and getting back into my van, and there was lots of food and water and everything else. And I was like, oh wow! But before I ate anything or drank anything, I just sat in that van, and I said, thank you to that animal, to that being. And I think the animals love us. They would love us. They would love to live in harmony with us and teach us and be our friends. We are so violent and cruel and disrespectful, and they're just waiting. Can human beings? We are destroying this precious web in these animals, and we say it's for our health, it's for our taste. We have reasons that mean nothing. And so I think our true health will come when we, can somehow each one of us vow to live our lives to somehow make a positive difference for beings who are at our mercy. And I think when we do that, our life will come into alignment with a higher purpose, and we'll know what it is to be grateful to be alive and to be happy and to be part of a positive solution on this planet. And I'm so grateful to that elk and to all the other beings who are doing the best they can to hold the space of conscious, aware celebration of life on this beautiful planet. It's definitely possible. I can see it coming. Thank you.
Hi, Do you guys know anything about the Monsanto forcing us to use seeds only one time to plant a crop, and then we won't be able to buy seeds any longer to, you know, turn the crops and do all that good stuff that we used to be able to do in farming? Do any of you have any updates on that?
I mean, that only applies to their genetically modified seeds, which they've been able to patent. So there is a march forward that the biotech companies are trying to get more, startup companies and the established companies are trying to get more and more foods to be approved to be genetically modified. But the good news is that right now, like the produce section of your supermarket, there aren't going to be any intentional approved genetically modified foods there. All the crops that have been approved are really just going into animal feed, or they're going into processed foods. There was the potato recently approved, so that could be coming on the market, and that would be in the produce section. But you know, if the way to avoid genetically modified foods are to eat organic. It's a really easy way to do that. But yeah, the seed issue just relates to Monsanto seeds, which is primarily corn and soybeans and canola.
Yeah, that Terminator technology, I think it's really important. Also, actually, I found out just recently, just to be aware, that if something says organic, if it doesn't say 100% organic, it actually could have some GMO in it. So for the packaged foods, right? So, but now there is this new certification that's certified GMO. What's it? The GMO project. And you can look for GMO project labels, and that's a good way to avoid purchasing any of those things. And yeah, it's a real battle to try to stop this kind of takeover of our food supply by the biotech industries, by the big pharmaceutical industries. And I think you know, it's really taking place a lot in India, a lot in sort of so-called less industrialized nations. And I think the more we can just stand up against this. My wife is Swiss. It's very interesting to see how the Swiss, they can't get anywhere in Switzerland because the people there garden, you know, and they just won't, they can't even begin to approve of that. And so I think, again, if we could educate the people here to the level they have been in some of the other countries, then we could definitely put a stop to this. And not just have GMO labeling, we should have GMO banning. We should just ban it. That's really what we should be doing. I think the labeling thing is really a bad idea. We should be banning it like they did in Maui, just not allow them to grow this stuff. It's terribly toxic. Roundup has now been shown to be a carcinogen, and you know, we're really, I think, being much too easy on these corporations.
I was in a march last year against Monsanto's, and I understand 50 cities had the march against Monsanto's. There was a few thousand people in my city, and it's interesting to know that no media anywhere covered it. Nobody covered it. So we can't get anywhere in our movement by depending on the media at all. I just want to mention also, well, some DVDs that I found very interesting. One of them a few years ago I got, it was eating. I guess we're familiar with eating. I was so impressed with it I bought 400 copies. Yes, I got it at a cheaper rate at 400 copies. And then there's Forks Over Knives. But just recently I saw the most horrific one ever. And if you think there's not cruelty to animals, you might want to watch it. Maybe you're familiar with it. You know what it is? It's called Earthlings. Earthlings, because we are Earthlings and so are the animals. And it scared me. And some people that were watching it said, I don't want to watch anymore. It really is horrible. So people might like to watch that. And one other little thing is I guess people know too, and fruits and vegetables, if they're organic, they have a sticker on them that starts with 9. And if they're GMOs, they start with 4. 4. So we don't buy anything that starts with a 4.
It's actually just non-organic. Starts with, it doesn't mean it's GMO if it starts
I
with a 4.
thought it meant that it was GMO.
No, it doesn't mean it's GMO.
Oh.
It means it's
So
not organic.
Casey is saying
But I'm not buying it
starts
anyway.
with 8.
Yeah.
I thought 8 was conventional and 4 was GMO, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm no expert, but I don't buy it unless it's a
7.
9.
Okay.
Okay. So
Yeah,
Right.
really, it's very important, I think, to eat non-GMO, whole food, organically grown, plant-based foods. I mean, this is really the bottom line. Don't buy processed food. Just don't buy them. You know, we don't buy, I mean, I think the only processed food we buy is Veganese. But I think other than that, it's just fruits and grains, and that's it. And I think, and vegetables, and grow as much of it as you can yourself, or at least buy from local people. Really, I think it's important to have a strong line on that. And it's just fabulous. It's a great foundation for health. And it's a great way to support people who are doing agriculture that's in alignment with our values. We should support those people. And I think it's really important not to support corporations that don't have our values at all. Just don't support them. Don't give them any money.
We're going to close. Do you want to? Would you like to make any closing thoughts? Any closing thoughts anyone has?
I'll just make one comment. I feel a little odd woman out here because I do consume meat. I eat very limited quantities, and I pay a higher price for it, and I always seek out more sustainably raised. But I'm starting to rethink because of wills. I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting for me is that Will and I are completely ideologically aligned, but we express our position completely differently. And I want to be more like Will, but I'm a corporate lawyer, so I've got that working against me. But just as Will advocates for veganism as a solution to this problem, and the problem that we're talking about on this panel is the externalization of costs. Of course, I agree with that, and I want to provide you this example because it is a little challenging to go vegan, but only in the way that it's challenging to learn how to drive a car or to learn how to ride a bicycle. And when I went vegan, it was a little difficult for a couple of months to figure out what to eat. But it's a little difficult when you first start driving a car because you got to check your mirrors all the time and you got this little checklist in your head like, okay, seatbelt, mirror, ship, locked door. But after you've been driving for 6 months or a year or a couple of years, that's completely second nature. You don't even think about it anymore. And nobody who has been vegan for any period of time beyond a few months thinks about it at all. It never, ever seems to be hard again after the initial transition. When the only reason it's hard, well, there are a couple of reasons. First of all, dairy contains opiates. It's designed to bring calves back to the udder so that they'll drink milk. So dairy is addictive. It's a little hard to wean yourselves off dairy because there's this small amount of opiates in them. But it's also kind of hard to figure out what to eat. When you've been eating, in my case, bacon double cheeseburgers and basically crap right up until the day you go vegan, it's a little difficult to decide what to eat on day 0 of being vegan. But it really is like learning how to drive a car or ride a bicycle. Once you figure it out, you're done, and you never think about it again. You never worry, gee, am I getting enough protein? Am I getting enough calcium? Because you just get it. Because when you eat plants, you just get the nutrients that you need, and you don't worry about it. It isn't difficult. And it bothers me to hear that objection raised so often. Like, boy, it's really hard to be vegan, isn't it? And the answer is it hard to drive a car? Oh, that's...
Thank you. Maybe I'll just say that I really hope that Dave doesn't feel like he has to change at all. Give a hand to Dave. Don't change. You need people like you with your your amazing clarity and the capacity you have to. He organized this campaign to have a billboard right on the 405 in L.A. that's to go vegan, right? What's it say on there or something? It's great, yeah. It shows.
There's an image of there are a couple of them, but one of them is an image of a guy eating a hot dog, and above it says "a moment of pleasure," and right next to it is an image of pigs in hyper-confinement, and above that it says "a lifetime of pain," and the bottom it says in big red letters "Go vegan." And it's getting like 8 million impressions a month.
How many?
8 million.
8 million impressions a month. Anyway, so Dave, no, don't change. No, it's really an honor to be on this panel with these wonderful people, and with all of you. I think I've already said plenty, so I won't say anything more. But I just know that we are part of a gathering wave of momentum. Of awareness, of love. That's really what veganism is. It's just living a life as much as we can of caring and love and inclusion. It's this kind of radical inclusion where I say I'm going to include all living beings within the sphere of my kindness and compassion and live my values. And as we do that, we create a space around us, I think, naturally, of freedom that naturally encourages others to question the official stories of our society that cause so much violence and devastation. And that by doing that together, we create a field that's growing even larger. And I love the fact that we have this all on video in the sense that it can go and be able to be viewed by other people as well. And so let's just go forth. It sounds funny to say, go forth and multiply, but I mean, go forth and multiply the message and be part of this transformation. Much love to you, everyone. Thank you very much for being part of this.